The dog stopped digging and started growling at something that wasn't supposed to be alive under 90 years of steel. Rock slammed down inches from Ethan's head as Koda hit him full force, knocking him sideways into the mud. The metal beneath the dirt let out a deep, hollow thud, like something inside had just shifted. Ethan froze, fingers pressed to the ground, feeling it. A faint vibration, steady, wrong. Koda stood over the spot, ears locked forward, low growl building as the wind carried a sound that didn't belong there. "What do you think is down there?" The sound came first. Metal. Dragging. Ethan Cole's eyes snapped open in the dark, his body already moving before his mind caught up. His hand closed around the knife beside him, fingers locking tight, breath held halfway in his chest. For a second, he didn't know where he was. The ceiling above him wasn't a ceiling. It was the underside of his truck bed, shadowed and cold. No walls, no squad, no radio chatter, just the wind. He stayed still, listening. The noise came again. Not the wind this time. Closer. Rhythmic. A dull, scraping sound that set something old and wired deep in his nerves humming like a tripwire pulled too tight. Ethan slid out from the back of the truck without a sound, boots hitting the frozen dirt soft as ash. He didn't switch on a light. Didn't need one. His eyes had already adjusted, scanning the tree line, the slope of the ravine, every shadow that might move.
Here, boy.
"Koda," he called, low. No answer, not even a rustle. Then he heard it, down below, scrape, scrape, scrape. Ethan moved toward the edge of the ravine, each step placed with care, weight balanced, the old habits returning without permission. The ground dipped sharply, dropping into a jagged cut through the earth, where the wreck sat like a broken tooth. The locals called it Devil's Spike. Ethan had seen it earlier that day, just a silhouette against the rock. A rusted boxcar jammed nose first into the stone at an angle that didn't make sense. Too steep, too clean, like it had been driven there on purpose. Now it loomed in the dark, a black shape against the starlit sky, and at its base, Koda. The German shepherd was crouched low, front legs braced, claws digging into the dirt with a steady, relentless rhythm. He wasn't barking, not even whining, just working, like he'd been given a command and nothing else in the world mattered.
Hey.
"Koda," Ethan said again, sharper this time.
Stop that.
The dog didn't turn.
Here now.
Ethan felt his jaw tighten. That wasn't like him. He started down the slope, boots sliding over loose gravel, one hand out to steady himself. The air down in the ravine felt colder, heavier somehow, as if it had settled there and never quite left. Koda's digging slowed as Ethan got closer, but he still didn't look up. "What the hell are you doing?" Ethan reached for the dog's collar, fingers brushing thick fur, then froze. Koda's body was rigid, not tense, not scared, focused. The kind of stillness Ethan had seen in men just before contact. Every muscle ready, every sense locked onto something unseen. "Easy," Ethan murmured. Koda's ears flicked, but his eyes stayed fixed on the ground in front of him. Ethan followed that gaze. The dirt there looked wrong. Not loose from digging, packed. Flattened in a way that didn't match the rest of the ravine floor. Like it had been disturbed once, a long time ago, and then left to settle again. The wind shifted overhead, whispering through the broken steel of the boxcar. The sound twisted as it passed through the hollow shell, low, almost like a breath. Ethan's grip tightened on the knife. "Koda. Back." This time the dog moved, but not away. He stepped between Ethan and the spot he'd been digging, chest squared, a low rumble building in his throat. Not loud, not aggressive. A warning. Ethan stared at him. "Contact?" he muttered under his breath, the word slipping out before he could stop it. Koda didn't blink. Ethan exhaled slowly, forcing his shoulders to loosen. This wasn't Afghanistan. There were no insurgents hiding under the dirt. No IED waiting for the wrong step. Just a wreck. Just a dog losing his mind over nothing. He reached down, grabbed Koda's collar, and pulled him back. Enough. We're done. For a second, the dog resisted, not pulling hard, not fighting, just holding. Then he gave in, stepping back, though his head turned immediately, eyes locking onto the same patch of ground again. Ethan didn't like that. He led Koda up the slope, boots crunching over rock, the wreck shrinking behind them. The wind picked up again, rattling through the steel ribs of the boxcar, sending a hollow clang echoing across the ravine. Ethan flinched before he could stop himself. For a split second, the sound wasn't metal. It was a casing hitting concrete, a rifle shot cracking too close. Someone shouting. He blinked hard. Gone. Just the wind again. He reached the truck and tied Koda's lead to the rear bumper, giving the dog just enough slack to lie down. Stay, he said. Koda didn't lie down. He stood there, ears forward, staring past Ethan, back toward the ravine. Ethan followed his gaze, the shape of the boxcar barely visible now in the dark. He told himself it was nothing, just an old wreck, just a dog being a dog. But his hand didn't leave the knife, and long after he lay back down in the truck bed, staring up at the empty Wyoming sky, he could still hear it in his head. Scrape, scrape, scrape. Like something beneath the earth, waiting. Ethan didn't remember falling asleep. One moment he was staring at the sky through the open bed of the truck, counting the gaps between the stars, listening for anything out of place. The next, darkness folded in, thin and restless, like a bad memory that refused to settle. The sound woke him again. Not scraping this time. Metal. Shifting. A long, hollow groan carried up from the ravine, stretched thin by the wind until it almost sounded like a voice. Ethan's eyes opened, sharp and immediate. No confusion this time. His body was already awake, heart steady, breath controlled. He lay still for a second, listening, letting the night settle around him like dust after a blast. Then he rolled to the edge of the truck bed and dropped down. Koda was already standing. The dog hadn't slept either. His posture was different now, less frantic, more alert. Tail still, ears forward, gaze locked on the same direction as before. The ravine. Ethan rubbed a hand across his face, rough stubble scraping against his palm. "You ever sleep?" he muttered. Koda didn't move. Ethan followed his line of sight again, the shape of the boxcar barely visible against the faint gray of the horizon. Dawn wasn't far off. The sky had that thin, colorless edge that came just before first light. The wind shifted, colder now, sliding down from the ridgeline. The metal groaned again. Ethan's jaw tightened. It wasn't just the sound. It was the pattern. Irregular. Weighted. Like pressure building, releasing in slow increments. He'd heard things like that before. Not in Wyoming. Different place. Different war. A convoy stalled outside Kandahar. Burned out vehicles, heat warping steel until it screamed under its own weight. He'd stood there, watching a twisted hull breathe in the sun, waiting for something inside it to give. He blinked, and the memory snapped loose. Just the wreck. Just the wind. He turned away from the ravine and walked back to the truck, grabbing the dented thermos from the passenger seat. The coffee inside was bitter and cold, but it did the job. He took a long drink, letting it sit on his tongue before swallowing. "Come on," he said. Koda fell in beside him without hesitation. They drove into town just after sunrise. Copper Ridge wasn't much. One main road, a gas station that doubled as a diner, and a handful of buildings that had seen better decades. The kind of place where everyone noticed when something didn't belong. Ethan parked near the diner and stepped out, boots crunching over gravel. Conversations inside dipped when he walked in. He didn't look at anyone. Didn't need to. He could feel it. Eyes on his back. Quiet judgment. The same look he'd seen in other towns, other stops. The look that said they'd already figured him out. Drifter. Trouble. Not staying long. He took a seat at the counter. "Coffee?" the waitress asked. He nodded. She poured it without a word, sliding the cup toward him. Her eyes flicked to Koda, who settled near the door, watching everything without moving. "Your dog been down by the spike?" she asked. Ethan paused, cup halfway to his lips. "Why?" She shrugged. "Heard some noise last night. Folks say that wreck shifts sometimes. Ground's not stable down there." Ethan took a sip. "It's just metal," he said. She gave a small, uncertain nod and moved away. A man at the far end of the counter leaned back on his stool. Thick shoulders, clean boots. The kind of man who owned more land than he needed. Harold Briggs. "You're the one camped out on that Delaney property," he said, voice carrying easy across the room. Ethan didn't answer right away, just drank his coffee. Briggs stood and walked over, slow and confident, like the space already belonged to him. "That wreck's been there 90 years, he went on. "Ain't moved for anyone yet." Ethan set the cup down. "Didn't ask." A faint smile pulled at the corner of Briggs's mouth. "No," he said, "but you should listen anyway." He rested his hands on the counter, leaning in just enough to make it clear he wasn't leaving. "Your old man," Briggs continued, "spent the last 10 years of his life chasing that thing. Thought there was something buried under it. Dug holes all over that ravine like a damn fool." Ethan's fingers tightened slightly against the ceramic. Briggs watched it happen. "Heard he lost everything trying to prove it," he added. "House. Work. Reputation. Left you with nothing but that land and a pile of rust." The diner had gone quiet. Ethan stared into his coffee. Steam curled up, thin and fading. For a second, the surface of the liquid reflected something else. Sunlight on metal, a broken convoy, smoke rising off blackened steel. He blinked. Gone again. "He didn't talk much," Ethan said finally. Briggs shrugged. "Didn't need to. Everyone knew how it ended." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded set of papers. "I'll make this simple," he said, sliding them across the counter. "I'll take the land off your hands. Cash. Enough to get you somewhere better than sleeping in that truck." Ethan didn't touch the papers. Koda shifted by the door, a low rumble building in his chest. Briggs glanced at the dog, then back at Ethan. "That wreck buried your father's life," he said quietly. "No reason it should bury yours too." Ethan looked up. Really looked at him this time. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Ethan pushed the papers back across the counter. "Not for sale." Briggs held his gaze a second longer, then let out a short breath that might have been a laugh. "Suit yourself," he said, tucking the papers away. "Just don't say nobody warned you." He turned and walked out, the door swinging shut behind him. The room slowly filled with sound again. Ethan finished his coffee in silence. Outside, the wind had picked up. Koda stepped beside him as they headed back to the truck, ears already angling toward the distant ravine. Ethan followed that line of sight once more. The boxcar stood where it always had, cutting into the earth like a blade. Still. silent. But somehow, not empty. Ethan kept his eyes on the ravine as he drove back, gravel popping under the truck tires, the engine humming low and steady. The road curved along the ridge, giving him a clear view of the broken land below. The boxcar stood exactly where it had the night before. Same angle, same silence. But now that he'd heard Briggs talk, something about it sat wrong in his gut. Koda shifted in the passenger seat, front paws planted on the dash, nose angled toward the glass. He wasn't whining, wasn't restless, just watching. Ethan slowed the truck without thinking. "Yeah," he muttered. "I see it too." He parked near the same clearing and killed the engine. For a moment, neither of them moved. The wind slid across the ridge, carrying dust and the faint scent of dry earth. No voices, no traffic, just open land stretching out in every direction like it had been forgotten on purpose. Ethan stepped out first, boots crunching. Koda followed, already ahead of him by a few steps, body low, tracking the slope like he'd memorized it. They didn't go down this time. Ethan stopped at the edge. He crouched, elbows on his knees, studying the wreck from above. The angle still bothered him. A derailment didn't do that. Not clean, not straight down like a spike driven into wood. There should have been more damage around it, more scatter, more chaos. Instead, it looked contained, focused. His eyes traced the ridgeline above it, then the narrow cut where the track must have run once. He pictured the train coming through. Speed, weight, momentum. No way it ended like that without something forcing it. He exhaled slowly. "Or I'm overthinking it," he said under his breath. Koda gave a short, low sound, almost like a disagreement. Ethan glanced at him. "You got a better read?" The dog didn't move, just kept staring. Ethan stood, brushing dirt from his hands, and turned back toward the truck. "Not today," he said. This time, Koda didn't follow right away. Ethan made it halfway to the truck before he realized it. He stopped, turned. Koda was still at the edge of the ravine, standing exactly where he'd been. Ethan felt something tighten in his chest. Koda. No movement. The dog's head tilted slightly, ears forward, locked on the same point below. Ethan walked back, slower this time. When he reached him, he followed the line again, down past the broken steel, past the shadowed angle where the nose of the boxcar disappeared into rock. Same spot. Same place Koda had been digging the night before. Ethan crouched again, closer now. He leaned forward, narrowing his eyes. The light had shifted just enough to show something he hadn't caught in the dark. The dirt wasn't just packed. It was layered, subtle, easy to miss. But the texture changed in a way that didn't match natural settling, like someone had filled something in, then walked away. Ethan's fingers hovered just above it. He didn't touch it. Not yet. A flicker of movement caught his eye. He turned his head just in time to see it. A flash of gray fur. A fox slipped out from a narrow gap between the buried nose of the boxcar and the rock beneath it, darting across the ravine floor before vanishing into the brush. Ethan went still. That gap. It shouldn't have been there. Not with the way the car was wedged. He stood slowly, every sense tightening. Koda let out a low growl, not aggressive, focused. "Yeah," Ethan said quietly. He took a step back from the edge, eyes never leaving the wreck. "Yeah, I see it." For a moment, everything went quiet. No wind, no metal shifting, just that one thought settling in. Someone had been down there. Not recently, but not naturally either. Ethan turned, heading back to the truck with more purpose now. He opened the rear door and reached in, pulling out a coil of old rope, a weathered harness, and a small pack he hadn't touched in months. His hand moved without hesitation, checking knots, testing tension, running through the motions like muscle memory never left. Koda was at his side again, watching. Ethan clipped the rope to the harness and slung it over his shoulder. "Tomorrow," he said. Koda's ears twitched. Ethan looked back at the ravine one more time, the boxcar cutting into the earth like something unfinished. "First light," he added. The wind returned, brushing across the ridge, carrying the faint metallic groan from below. This time Ethan didn't flinch, he just listened. And for the first time since he'd arrived, he didn't hear emptiness. He heard structure, pressure, something holding. Ethan was already awake before the light came. No alarm, no need. The cold had settled deep into the metal of the truck overnight, creeping into his bones. But he didn't feel it the same way anymore. Years of worse had taken the edge off things like that. What stayed sharp was the quiet. Too quiet. He lay there for a second, eyes open, listening. No wind, no metal, no scraping. That was worse. He pushed himself up and swung his legs over the side of the truck. Koda was already on the ground, pacing once, then stopping, ears forward, fixed on the ravine. "Yeah," Ethan said, voice low. "I hear it too." Even though there was nothing to hear. He moved through his gear without thinking. Rope coiled tight. Harness checked twice. Knife clipped where his hand would find it without looking. A small first aid kit shoved into the side pocket of his pack. Old habits. Not something you turned off. He slung the rope over his shoulder and started toward the edge. Koda didn't wait this time. He moved ahead, sure-footed, picking his way down the slope like he'd already mapped it out in his head. "Slow," Ethan called. The dog paused, looked back, then continued, just a little slower. Ethan followed, testing each step, weight shifting carefully over loose gravel. The ground here wasn't stable. Too much erosion, too many years of neglect. One bad move, and you didn't stop sliding until the bottom decided for you. Halfway down, a rock shifted under his boot. He dropped low instantly, hand catching the slope, body flattening without panic. Breath controlled, eyes scanning. Nothing moved, just gravity reminding him it was still in charge. He pushed up and kept going. When he reached the bottom, the air changed. Cooler, stiller, the kind of quiet that didn't carry sound. It swallowed it. The boxcar loomed above him now, massive and wrong. Up close, the damage was clearer. Steel bent inward, not outward. The frame warped like something had crushed it from the inside as much as the outside. Ethan stepped closer, boots sinking slightly into the packed dirt. Koda was already there, right at the base. Same spot. He didn't dig this time. He stood over it, body angled, head lowered, eyes fixed, waiting. Ethan crouched beside him. The dirt looked even stranger up close. Not just packed, compressed. Layers of different color and texture. Faint lines running through it like sediment that had been disturbed and forced back together. He reached out slowly, paused, then pressed his fingers into the surface. It gave, just slightly. Not rock, not untouched ground either. "Someone's been here," he muttered. Koda's ears flicked. Ethan shifted his weight, leaning in closer. That's when he saw it. A faint line, barely visible, cutting across the dirt at an angle. Too straight to be natural. Too clean to be erosion. A boundary. He brushed at it with his hand, clearing away a thin layer of dust. More lines appeared. Edges. Not random. Structured. A shape buried just beneath the surface. Ethan sat back on his heels, eyes narrowing. "This isn't just Phil," he said. Koda suddenly tensed. Before Ethan could react, the dog lunged forward, not into the dirt, but at Ethan himself. A sharp tug on his sleeve, teeth catching fabric, pulling hard. "Hey!" Ethan shifted back instinctively, just as a chunk of loose rock dropped from above, slamming into the ground exactly where his hand had been. The impact sent a shock through the dirt, a dull thud echoing off the steel of the boxcar. Ethan froze. Koda released his sleeve and stepped back, standing between him and the falling debris, head tilted upward, tracking the source. Ethan followed his gaze, a small ledge above the car's nose, crumbling, unstable. He exhaled slowly. "Good call," he said. Koda didn't respond, just watched. Ethan moved a few feet to the side, putting distance between himself and the drop zone. Then he turned back to the ground. The lines were still there, clearer now. He brushed more dirt away, careful, controlled. The shape emerged slowly. Not natural, not random. Edges forming a rough rectangle, maybe 2 feet across. His fingers traced along one side. Stopped. There. Another detail. A small indentation. Circular. He leaned closer, wiping the dust away with the edge of his sleeve. Metal. Not rusted like the rest of the wreck. Different. Smoother. Ethan sat back again, pulse steady but heavier now. "All right," he said quietly. "Now we're getting somewhere." Koda lowered himself beside the spot, not lying down, just settling like he'd claimed it, guarding it. Ethan looked up at the boxcar, then back at the ground. This wasn't just a wreck. It was a cover. Something had been put here, deliberately. Buried just deep enough to be missed. Left just intact enough to survive. The wind finally returned, slipping through the ravine, catching the broken edges of the steel above them. This time, when the metal groaned, Ethan didn't hear decay. He heard pressure, weight, a system holding together under force. He glanced at Koda. The dog's eyes were still locked on the spot between them. Unblinking, unmoving. Like he knew, this was only the beginning. Ethan didn't touch the metal. Not yet. He sat there a moment longer, letting the shape settle in his mind, mapping it the way he used to map doorways and corners in a foreign compound. Edges, angles, weak points. Nothing rushed, nothing wasted. He brushed the last of the loose dirt back over the exposed surface, covering it just enough to hide the outline again. "Not here," he said quietly. Koda lifted his head. Ethan stood, scanning the slope above them. The ledge that had dropped the rock was still unstable, small fragments shifting with the wind. Too exposed, too unpredictable. "Gonna do this right," he added. Koda pushed himself up, favoring nothing, steady as ever, though his eyes never left the ground they'd uncovered. Ethan gave the wreck one more look. Up close, it felt even more wrong. The steel wasn't just bent, it was folded, like something had driven it down and locked it into place. The front end had split the rock beneath it, forcing a narrow seam open that shouldn't have existed. Impaled. That was the word that came to him. Not wrecked, not crashed. Driven. He turned and started back up the slope. The climb was slower than the descent. Loose gravel gave way under his boots, forcing him to angle his steps, weight low, hands occasionally catching the ground for balance. Koda stayed just ahead, stopping when Ethan slowed, checking back like a point man, making sure the rest of the unit was still moving. Halfway up, Ethan paused, not because he was tired, because something didn't add up. He looked back down. From above, the boxcar lined up too clean with the cut in the ravine. Too straight. Too centered. A derailment would have scattered debris, twisted metal across the slope. broken timber, shattered rock. But there wasn't any of that. Just the car. One piece, like everything else had been removed. Clean sight, Ethan muttered. The phrase slipped out before he could stop it. He frowned. Why would a wreck be cleaned? And who would have done it? This far out. Koda gave a low huff, shifting his weight. Ethan exhaled and kept climbing. At the top, the wind hit harder, pushing against him, carrying dust across the ridge. The open sky felt too big after the tight silence of the ravine. He walked back to the truck without speaking, opened the rear, started pulling out what he needed. Shovel, pickaxe, extra rope, a small folding saw. Tools he hadn't planned on using when he first got here. He laid them out on the ground, checking each one the way he used to check gear before a mission. Edges, weight, balance. Koda circled once, then settled near the truck, watching. "You're staying up here this time," Ethan said. The dog's ears twitched. "Too tight down there. Need space to move." Koda didn't argue. Didn't lie down either. Just stayed alert. Ethan packed what he needed, slung the gear over his shoulder, and headed back toward the edge. This time there was no hesitation. No second guessing. The descent felt different. Deliberate. Like stepping into something that had already started. At the bottom, the air closed in again, heavy and still. Ethan moved straight to the spot, dropped the pack, uncovered the metal with careful sweeps of his hand. The shape came back into view. Clearer now. Rectangular. Reinforced. Not part of the original car. Added. He ran his fingers along the edge. Cold. Smooth. Different from the rusted steel around it. He picked up the shovel and drove it into the dirt beside the plate. The ground resisted at first, then gave. Packed layers breaking apart with a dull, heavy sound. Ethan worked in steady rhythm. Dig. Clear. Shift. No wasted movement. Minutes turned into something longer. The sun climbed higher, but down here it barely touched the ground, leaving the work in shadow. Sweat built under his jacket, but he didn't slow. Each layer he removed revealed more of the structure. Corners. Depth. The plate extended further than he expected. Not just a cover. A door. Koda barked once from above. Sharp. Warning. Ethan froze. Listened. Nothing moved. No falling rock. No shifting steel. Just silence again. He looked up toward the ridge. Koda stood at the edge, body rigid, eyes locked not on Ethan, but beyond him, behind him. Ethan turned slowly, scanning. The ravine stretched out empty. But the feeling, that wasn't empty. It pressed in from behind his shoulders, the same way it had in narrow alleys overseas, when you knew someone was watching but couldn't see where from. He held still, counted his breath. 1, 2, 3. Nothing. The feeling didn't go away. It just waited. Ethan turned back to the work. "Keep watch," he called up. Koda didn't move. Ethan drove the shovel down again, harder this time. The blade struck metal with a sharp, ringing clang. He stopped, set the shovel aside, dropped to one knee, cleared the dirt away with both hands. The surface beneath was larger than he'd thought, and in the center, a recessed circle, a dial. Ethan stared at it, pulse steady but heavier now. Not railroad, not salvage. This was something else. Something designed to be opened by someone who knew how. He sat back slightly, wiping dirt from his hands onto his jeans. The wind slipped through the ravine again, brushing over the steel above him. The boxcar groaned, long, low, like something under pressure. Ethan didn't look up this time. His eyes stayed on the metal plate, on the dial, on the thing buried beneath 90 years of dust and silence. Whatever his father had been chasing, he hadn't been wrong. Ethan stayed there for a long time, crouched over the metal plate, letting that thought settle into something solid. Not a guess. Not a hope. A fact. His father hadn't wasted his life chasing ghosts. He'd found something, and whatever it was, it had been important enough to hide. Ethan reached out again, this time brushing the dirt more carefully from the surface. The dial came into full view, circular, set deep into the plate, its edges worn but intact. Faint markings circled its rim, almost erased by time. Numbers, not random, not decorative, measured. He ran his thumb along the edge, feeling the resistance. The mechanism didn't budge, not even a fraction. Locked tight. "All right," he murmured. He shifted his position, leaning closer, eyes narrowing as he studied the faint etchings around the dial. The light down here was poor, so he pulled a small flashlight from his pack and angled it low. The beam cut across the surface, and something changed. The markings stood out sharper under the angled light. Thin, deliberate lines etched into the metal just above the dial. A symbol. A circle, bisected with lines that stretched outward like spokes. Coordinates. Or something close to it. Ethan felt a slow, familiar tightening in his chest. He'd seen patterns like this before. Not here. Not in a place like this. But overseas. Supply caches marked in ways that only the right eyes would recognize. Hidden in plain sight. Coded just enough to pass unnoticed. He leaned back slightly, letting the image settle. "Not railroad," he said. Koda barked once from above. Short. Sharp. Ethan glanced up. The dog hadn't moved from the ridge. Still watching. Still holding position. Good. Ethan looked back down. "If this is a lock," he said quietly, "then this isn't random." He swept more dirt away from the surrounding steel. More markings appeared. Faint. Broken. But there. Numbers this time. Not in a straight line. Grouped. He froze. His breath slowed. Not just numbers. Instructions. His mind moved without effort now, slipping into a place it hadn't been in years. Right. Left. Turns. Sequence. He could see it forming. A combination lock. Ethan wiped his hands on his jeans and sat back on his heels. For a moment, he didn't move, didn't touch the dial, because another thought had just surfaced. If this was a lock, then someone had meant to keep something in, or keep something out. The ravine pressed in around him again, the silence thick, heavy. He glanced over his shoulder, scanning the length of the canyon. Nothing moved, but the feeling from earlier, it hadn't gone away. It had just stepped back. Waiting. Ethan turned back to the plate. He set his fingers on the dial. Cold metal. Solid. He applied a small amount of pressure. Nothing. He increased it slightly. The dial resisted. Then, a faint click. Barely audible. But there. Ethan's grip tightened. He rotated the dial slowly to the right. The movement was stiff, grinding softly as if the mechanism hadn't been touched in decades. Dirt flaked away from the edges as it turned. He stopped at the first number. 44. Held it. Listened. Nothing. He exhaled. Turned it back. Past 0. Slow. Deliberate. The second number came into place. 12. The dial clicked again. Louder this time. Ethan's pulse ticked up just a fraction. He shifted his weight, keeping his body angled, one hand always free, always ready. Habit. He turned the dial again, this time to the left, counting the movement. 1, 2, 3. The dial stopped. There was a pause, a long, hollow silence that seemed to stretch across the entire ravine. Then, a deep internal sound. Not from the surface, from within. A heavy metallic clunk echoed up through the plate, vibrating faintly under Ethan's hand. He froze. Koda barked again, louder now. Ethan's head snapped up. "Hold!" he called instinctively. The word came out sharp. Command tone. Koda went silent. Still. Watching. Ethan turned back to the plate. The dial had gone loose. Unlocked. He stared at it, breathing slow, steady. It worked. After all this time, it still worked. He placed both hands on the recessed edge of the plate, fingers finding the slight groove along its side. Tested it. It didn't move. Not yet. He shifted his footing, braced himself, pulled harder. The plate resisted, then gave just slightly, enough to tell him it wasn't sealed by corrosion alone. Something inside was still holding. Ethan stopped. Didn't force it. Not yet. He sat back again, wiping sweat from his forehead with the back of his wrist. "This isn't just buried," he said quietly. "It's sealed." The wind moved through the ravine again, catching the hollow shell of the boxcar above him. This time, the sound was deeper, heavier, like the whole structure was reacting. Ethan looked up at the twisted steel, then back down at the plate beneath his hands. His father had found this, seen it, understood what it might be. But something had stopped him. Time. Strength. Or something else. Ethan's jaw tightened. "Yeah," he muttered. "I get it now." He pushed himself to his feet and stepped back, giving the plate space. This wasn't something to rush. Not alone. Not without thinking it through. He looked up at Koda. The dog was still there, still watching, still waiting, like he'd been doing all along. Ethan grabbed the shovel and began clearing more dirt from around the edges, widening the space, exposing the full outline. Each movement careful, controlled, because whatever was under that plate wasn't just something lost. It was something that had been meant to stay hidden, and now it wasn't. The plate wasn't just sealed. It was resisting. Ethan stood there, breathing slow, eyes locked on the exposed metal as if it might shift again on its own. The dial hung loose now, the lock undone, but the weight beneath it hadn't changed. Whatever held it closed was still there. He stepped in again, crouching low, one knee pressed into the cold dirt. His fingers traced the edge, searching for leverage, something he could use without forcing it blind. "Think," he muttered. Koda barked once above. Not warning. Not yet. Ethan ignored it, leaning in closer. He wedged the edge of his knife into the seam, testing the gap. Nothing. Too tight. He pulled the blade back and reached for the small pry bar from his pack. Old steel. Solid. Good weight. He slid it into the same narrow groove and pressed down. The metal groaned, a low, deep sound that echoed up through the wreck like something waking. Ethan froze, listened. Nothing followed. He exhaled. "All right," he said quietly. He shifted his stance, bracing one boot against the dirt, both hands on the bar now. This time, he pulled harder. The plate gave. Just a fraction. Enough to feel movement. Enough to know it could open. Koda barked again, louder. Ethan's head snapped up. "Hold!" The command cut clean through the ravine. Silence followed. Too fast. Too complete. Ethan's instincts flared. He stood, turning halfway, scanning the ridge. Koda was no longer still. The dog had moved down the slope, faster than before, sliding over gravel, closing the distance between them. Wrong. Ethan stepped back from the plate. Koda, stay up! The dog didn't listen. Didn't even slow. His body was low, ears pinned slightly back, eyes fixed not on Ethan, but above him. Ethan felt it before he saw it. A shift in the air, a faint cracking sound from the ledge above the wreck. He turned, too late to think, only react. Koda. The dog hit him full force in the chest, hard enough to knock him sideways off his footing. Ethan went down, shoulder slamming into the dirt, breath punched out of him, and a split second later, the world came down where he'd been kneeling. Rock, heavy, fast, a slab the size of a car tire broke loose from the ledge above and crashed into the ground, smashing into the edge of the exposed plate with a violent crack. Dust exploded upward, choking the air. Ethan rolled instinctively, pulling himself away from the impact zone, one arm coming up to shield his face. Silence followed, thick, ringing. He coughed once, pushing himself up onto his hands. Koda? No answer. His chest tightened. Koda! He scrambled forward through the settling dust, eyes scanning. Then he saw him, a few feet away, on his side. Still. Ethan's heart dropped hard enough to hurt. He moved fast now, dropping to his knees beside the dog, hands already searching, checking. Koda, hey! The dog's eyes flickered open. Good. Alive. Ethan exhaled sharply. Stay with me. He ran his hands along the dog's body, methodical, controlled, despite the surge of adrenaline. Chest, legs, spine. Then he found it. The shoulder. Koda flinched, just slightly, as Ethan's fingers pressed near the joint. All right. All right. Not broken, but hit, hard. Ethan reached for his pack, pulling it open with quick, practiced movements. Gauze, wrap, small bottle of antiseptic. His hands shook for half a second, then steadied. He cleaned the wound first, dirt and dust mixing with the blood along the fur. Koda didn't pull away, didn't whine, just watched him. Trusting. Easy, Ethan murmured. You're good. You're good. He wrapped the shoulder tight enough to hold, not enough to cut movement. Finished the knot. Checked it once. Koda shifted slightly, testing his weight. Don't, Ethan said. The dog stilled. Ethan sat back on his heels, breath slowing again, the rush fading into something heavier. He looked at the impact point. The rock had struck right where his head had been. Not inches. Exactly. He glanced back at Koda. The dog met his eyes. No confusion there. No fear. Just that same steady focus. Ethan swallowed once. Yeah, he said quietly. I know. He reached out and rested his hand against Koda's neck, fingers curling into the thick fur. Good call. The wind moved through the ravine again, softer now, carrying the last of the dust away. Ethan turned back to the plate. The rock hadn't destroyed it. If anything, it had helped. The impact had shifted the edge, opening a slightly wider seam along one side. Just enough. Ethan stood slowly, muscles tight, senses still running hot. He looked at the plate, then at Koda, then back again. You just bought us another chance, he said. Koda didn't move, but his tail gave one slow, steady thump against the dirt. Ethan picked up the pry bar again. This time, when he drove it into the gap, it went deeper. The metal groaned louder, longer, and for the first time since he'd found it, the plate began to open. slow, reluctant, like it had forgotten how. Ethan leaned his weight into the pry bar, muscles tightening as the metal groaned under pressure. The sound wasn't sharp. It was deep, buried, like something shifting far below the surface. The gap widened, an inch, then two, enough for cold air to slip through. Ethan stopped. Froze. The air coming out wasn't stale. It wasn't rot. It was dry. Clean. Wrong. He glanced at Koda. The dog was already watching him, head lifted, ears forward despite the bandage around his shoulder. Not tense this time. Alert. Waiting. Ethan pulled the pry bar free and set it aside. He crouched lower, gripping the edge of the plate with both hands. "All right," he muttered. He pulled. The plate resisted again, then shifted with a heavy scrape, swinging open on hidden hinges buried deep beneath the dirt. The sound echoed through the ravine, then stopped. Silence dropped in behind it. Ethan leaned back slightly, staring into the opening. Dark. Square. About 4 feet across. He waited, counted his breath. Listened for anything. Movement. Shifting. Air displacement. Nothing. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the flashlight again. Clicked it on. The beam cut into the darkness and stopped. Not because it hit a wall, because it hit something. Stacked. Organized. Deliberate. Ethan lowered himself closer to the opening, angling the light. Inside the compartment, metal cylinders. Several of them. Long, sealed, lined in rows. And behind them, bundles. Wrapped tight in oilcloth, secured with straps that hadn't rotted, hadn't fallen apart. Preserved. Perfectly. Ethan didn't move. Didn't speak. He just stared. No gold. No cash. No obvious value. Just material. Documents, maybe. Samples. Data. His first thought wasn't disappointment. It was confusion. "What the hell is this?" he said under his breath. Koda shifted beside him, pushing himself up slowly despite the injury. He stepped closer to the opening, nose lowering toward it. Ethan held out a hand instinctively. "Easy." Koda paused, then leaned in just enough to sniff. He didn't recoil, didn't growl, didn't react at all, which somehow made it worse. Ethan reached inside. Slow. Careful. His fingers closed around one of the cylinders. It was heavier than it looked. Cold and smooth, sealed at both ends with wax that had hardened but not cracked. He pulled it free and set it beside him. Then one of the wrapped bundles. The oilcloth was stiff but intact, the leather straps still tight. Ethan hesitated. Something about the way it was packed, not random, not rushed, intentional, like whoever put this here expected it to stay. For a long time. He loosened the strap, unwrapped the outer layer. Inside, paper. Thick, aged, but not ruined. He unfolded the top sheet carefully. The beam of the flashlight slid across it. Lines. Detailed. Precise. Not handwriting. Drawings. Maps. Ethan frowned, adjusting the angle of the light. Topography. Depth markings. Flow indicators. He didn't understand all of it, but he understood enough. This wasn't cargo. This was information. He flipped another page. More of the same. Symbols, notes, measurements. His pulse picked up, slow and steady. "Someone didn't want this lost," he murmured. Koda let out a low sound. Ethan looked up. The dog wasn't watching the maps. He was watching the ravine. Behind them. Ethan's body reacted before his mind did. He turned sharply, light sweeping across the canyon. Nothing. No movement. No sound. But that feeling again. The one that had been there since the beginning. Not empty. Not alone. He held still. Listened. Wind. Distant. Nothing else. He turned back slowly. The maps lay open in his lap, the cylinders beside him. Ethan stared at them for another long moment, then at the open compartment. His father had found this, seen it, maybe even opened it, and then walked away, or been forced to. Ethan's jaw tightened. "This is what you were after," he said quietly, almost to himself. Koda shifted again, stepping closer, pressing lightly against Ethan's side, grounding him. Ethan exhaled slowly. He wrapped the map back up carefully, retying the strap with steady hands. Then he placed it back inside the compartment, exactly where he'd found it. Not the time, not the place, not yet. He closed the hatch halfway, leaving it ajar, then stood, scanning the ravine one more time. The silence hadn't changed. But now, it felt different. Not like something waiting to be found. Like something that had just been opened. Ethan grabbed the cylinder and slid it into his pack. Just one. For now. He looked down at Koda. "You picked the right spot," he said. Koda held his gaze, still, steady, like he'd known all along. Ethan glanced once more at the dark opening beneath the wreck. Whatever this was, it wasn't over. It had just started. Ethan didn't rush. He covered the hatch again, this time properly, pulling the metal plate down until it sat flush, brushing dirt over the seams, restoring the illusion of untouched ground. Not perfect. But enough. He didn't want eyes on it. Not yet. Koda stayed close, favoring his injured shoulder but refusing to fall behind. Every few steps he glanced back toward the ravine like he expected something to follow. Ethan didn't tell him he was wrong. They reached the truck just as the sun began to drop behind the ridge, turning the sky a dull, dusty orange. The kind of light that made everything look older than it was. Ethan tossed his pack into the bed, then climbed in after it. "Stay," he said. Koda jumped up anyway. Ethan didn't argue. He sat against the side panel, pulled the metal cylinder from his bag, and turned it slowly in his hands. Still sealed. Still intact. Whatever was inside had been protected for a long time. He reached for his knife, slid the blade carefully along the wax seal. It cracked with a dry, brittle sound, flaking away in thin curls. Ethan twisted the cap. It resisted, then gave. A soft release of pressure, like something letting go. He tipped the cylinder and caught what slid out. Paper, tightly rolled. He unwrapped it slowly, careful not to tear the edges. The map opened across his knees. For a moment he didn't understand what he was looking at. Then his eyes adjusted. Lines, contours, elevation marks. Not just the ravine, the entire valley. And beneath it, more lines. Blue, faint, threading through the earth like veins. Ethan leaned closer. The markings weren't surface features. They were underground. Flow paths. Water. His brow furrowed. "That's not," he muttered. He flipped the map over. More notes. Handwritten this time. Precise, clean, not rushed. Numbers, depth readings, pressure estimates, coordinates. Ethan sat still, very still, because something about this felt bigger than he wanted it to be. Koda shifted beside him, resting his head lightly against Ethan's leg. Not asking. Just there. Ethan exhaled slowly. Yeah, he said under his breath. You felt it too. He rolled the map back up halfway, then stopped. Something else caught his eye. A name. Faded, but still readable. Stamped into the corner. U.S. Geological Survey. Ethan's jaw tightened. This wasn't random. This wasn't someone scribbling guesses. This was official work. Or it had been. He flipped through the rest of the contents. Another sheet. Cross-sections of rock layers. Depth markers pushing deeper than anything he'd expected. And again, those blue lines. Consistent. Repeating. Everywhere. Water. Not surface water. Deep. Pressurized. Hidden. Ethan sat back against the truck wall, the map still open in his hands. The wind picked up, brushing across the clearing, tugging lightly at the paper. He didn't move. His father had known, not guessed. Known. That wreck wasn't worthless. It wasn't a failure. It was covering something, protecting it, hiding it. Ethan swallowed once. That's what you saw, he said quietly. Koda's ears flicked at the sound of his voice. Ethan folded the map carefully this time, not rushing, not careless. He slid it back into the cylinder and sealed it loosely, not like before, just enough to keep it safe. He stared out toward the ravine. The boxcar sat in shadow now, the last of the light catching its rusted edges, turning it almost black against the stone. It didn't look like a wreck anymore. It looked like a marker. A lid. Ethan ran a hand over his face, feeling the grit of dirt and sweat. This isn't small, he muttered. Not something you sold. Not something you walked away from. Something people would fight over. Something that could change the land itself. He stood slowly, stepping down from the truck bed. Koda followed, landing heavier than usual, but steady. Ethan walked a few steps away, scanning the ridgeline. Same silence, same empty stretch of land, but now, it felt different, like the balance had shifted, like something had been taken out of the ground that wasn't meant to be touched. He turned back to the truck, grabbed the cylinder again, and locked it inside a metal case bolted beneath the seat. Out of sight. Out of reach. For now. Koda stood beside him, body angled toward the ravine again. Always the ravine. Ethan rested a hand on the dog's neck. Tomorrow, he said quietly. We go back. Koda didn't move, but his tail gave one slow, steady sweep through the dust. Ethan looked out one last time at the darkening shape of the boxcar. Whatever had been buried there for 90 years was no longer buried. And sooner or later, someone else was going to figure that out. Ethan felt it before he saw it. The next morning, the air had changed. Still cold, still dry, but heavier, like pressure building ahead of a storm that hadn't shown itself yet. He didn't sleep much. Didn't try to. Every time he closed his eyes, the map came back. Those blue lines threading beneath the earth, running deeper than anything visible from the surface. Water. Enough to change everything. Enough to make that land worth more than anyone in Copper Ridge had guessed. Koda was already up when Ethan stepped out of the truck, pacing once, then stopping, watching the ridge instead of the ravine this time. That was new. Ethan followed his line of sight. Nothing there. Just empty land and pale morning light. Still. Yeah, he muttered. I know. He grabbed his gear again. Movements faster now. No hesitation. No second guessing. But before he could turn toward the ravine, an engine cut through the silence. Ethan froze. Koda's ears snapped forward. The sound came from the direction of town, low at first, then growing louder as it climbed the ridge road. Not a passing vehicle. Coming here. Ethan moved without thinking. He grabbed the metal case from under the seat, checked the latch, then slid it deeper beneath the truck, covering it with an old tarp and a pile of tools. Out of sight. Koda shifted beside him, body tense. The engine grew louder. Then, a truck crested the ridge. Black. Clean. Not local. Ethan stepped away from his own vehicle, putting space between himself and anything worth noticing. His posture changed. Looser, less alert. But his eyes stayed sharp. The truck rolled to a stop 20 yards out. Engine idling, dust settling slowly around it. The driver's door opened. Harold Briggs stepped out. But he wasn't alone. A second man climbed out from the passenger side, older, thinner, wearing a clean jacket that didn't belong out here. He carried himself differently, measured, observant. Ethan didn't like that. Briggs gave a casual nod, like they were meeting by accident. "Morning," he called. Ethan didn't answer right away, just watched. Briggs stepped closer, hands loose at his sides. "Thought I might find you out here," he said. "Figured you'd be taking one last look before you changed your mind." Ethan's gaze flicked briefly to the second man. "Didn't," he said. Briggs smiled thinly. "Yeah," he said. "I had a feeling." He gestured behind him. "This here's Dr. Miller, geological engineer. Passing through. Heard about the old wreck." The second man gave a small nod. His eyes weren't on Ethan. They were on the ravine. Ethan felt it again, that pressure in his chest. Not fear, recognition. This man knew what he was looking at. Or at least, knew what it could be. Dr. Miller stepped forward a few paces, stopping at the edge of the ridge. He studied the boxcar in silence, hands resting loosely in his pockets. "You've been down there?" he asked without turning. Ethan didn't answer. Koda let out a low rumble. Miller's head tilted slightly at the sound. Then he turned. Slow. Measured. His eyes met Ethan's. And for a second, there was no guessing. No pretending. He saw it. Whatever Ethan had found, Miller knew there was something. "Interesting formation," Miller said quietly. "That angle. Not natural for a derailment." Briggs glanced between them, catching the shift without understanding it. "Like I said," Briggs cut in, louder now. "Just a wreck. Nothing more." Miller didn't respond to that. He kept his eyes on Ethan. "You mind if I take a closer look?" he asked. Ethan didn't move, didn't speak. The wind picked up slightly, carrying dust across the ridge. Koda stepped forward, positioning himself just slightly ahead of Ethan. Not aggressive, but not yielding either. Miller noticed. A faint flicker of something crossed his expression. "Respect." Ethan finally spoke. "Ground's unstable," he said. "Wouldn't recommend it." Miller held his gaze for another moment, then nodded once. "Fair enough." But he didn't step back right away. Instead, he looked past Ethan, at the truck, at the ground, at the setup, reading. Ethan saw it happen. The small details being logged, stored. Miller turned away at last, walking back toward Briggs. "Not much to see," he said. Briggs smirked. "Told you." But Ethan didn't miss the tone. Miller wasn't convinced. Not even close. They got back into the truck without another word. The engine turned. The vehicle rolled back the way it came, disappearing over the ridge. Silence returned. But it wasn't the same. Ethan stood there a long moment, watching the empty road. Koda's growl faded slowly, his posture easing, but not fully. "They know," Ethan said under his breath. "Not everything. Not yet. But enough." He turned back toward the ravine. The boxcar sat there, unchanged. But now, it felt exposed, like something that had stayed hidden too long and was finally being seen. Ethan grabbed his gear again, faster this time, more urgent. "We're not waiting," he said. Koda was already moving, because whatever had been buried beneath that wreck was no longer just his to find. Ethan didn't slow. He moved down the slope faster than before, boots sliding, catching, adjusting without hesitation. The careful pacing from earlier was gone. This wasn't observation anymore. This was timing. Koda kept up despite the injury, favoring his shoulder only slightly, pushing through it without complaint. Every few steps, he glanced back toward the ridge. Not just tracking. Listening. Ethan noticed. "So do I," he said under his breath. They reached the bottom just as the first drop hit, a single dark mark against the dust, then another. Ethan looked up. The sky had shifted while he wasn't paying attention, clouds rolling in low and heavy, dark purple at the edges, the kind that didn't build slowly, the kind that hit hard. "Great," he muttered. Thunder rolled across the valley. Not distant. Close. Too close. Ethan turned toward the boxcar, scanning quickly. The hatch, the work site, the gear. Everything suddenly felt exposed. "Move," he said. Koda was already heading for the base of the wreck. Ethan followed, grabbing his tools as he passed, shoving them into his pack. The wind picked up fast now, kicking dust into the air, stinging against his face. Another crack of thunder. Closer. Then the rain came, hard, no warning, just a wall of water slamming down into the ravine. Within seconds, the dry ground began to change. Water didn't soak in. It ran. Fast. Ethan's head snapped toward the far end of the ravine. Movement. Not natural. A wagon. Halfway down the canyon, angled wrong, one wheel stuck deep in the mud that hadn't been there seconds ago. A man was shouting, voice torn apart by the wind. A woman clutched two small kids, pulling them close as the rising water swirled around their legs. Ethan didn't think, didn't weigh options, didn't hesitate. He grabbed the rope. "Koda, on me!" The dog moved instantly. Ethan ran toward the family, boots sinking into the fast softening ground, water already rushing around his ankles. "Hey!" he shouted. "Stay where you are!" The man looked up, eyes wide, panic breaking through whatever control he had left. "The wheel!" he shouted. "We're stuck! I see it!" Ethan snapped. He reached them just as the water surged higher, slamming into the wagon's side hard enough to shift it another inch. Unstable. "Listen to me," Ethan said, voice cutting through the chaos. "You move when I tell you. Not before. You understand?" The man nodded. Barely. Ethan turned, scanning quickly. The boxcar. Anchored. Solid. The only thing in this ravine that wasn't going anywhere. He threw the rope toward the wagon. "Wrap it around the axle," he ordered. The man fumbled, hands shaking, but did it. Ethan pulled the other end tight, bracing himself against a large rock outcrop, looping the rope once, twice, creating tension, control. "Koda!" he called. The dog was already in position, teeth gripping the rope, body low against the current. "Good," Ethan said. Another surge of water hit. Higher now, knee-deep, moving fast. "All right!" Ethan shouted. "One at a time. You—" He pointed to the woman. "Take the kids. Follow the rope. Don't let go." She nodded, clutching the children tighter. Now! They moved, slow at first, then faster as the water pushed harder. Ethan held the line, muscles straining, adjusting tension with small movements, keeping the rope steady. Koda dug in beside him, pulling when needed, adjusting instinctively. Halfway across, the smallest child slipped. A sharp cry cut through the storm. The rope jerked. Ethan reacted instantly. Hold! He shifted his footing, tightening the line, pulling hard enough to stabilize them without snapping the rope. Koda lunged forward a step, bracing, teeth still locked. The woman grabbed the child again, pulling them close. They kept moving, step by step, until they reached him. Ethan grabbed the first child, lifting them clear of the water, passing them behind him toward higher ground. Go, he said. Stay up there. The second followed. Then the woman. The man came last, slipping once, catching himself just in time. Ethan hauled him the final few feet, dragging him clear as another surge of water slammed into the empty wagon. The rope snapped loose from the axle. The wagon shifted, then broke free, swept away down the ravine in seconds. Gone. Ethan stood there, chest rising, breath controlled but heavy. The storm roared around them, but the immediate danger passed. The family huddled together on higher ground, soaked, shaking, but alive. The man looked at Ethan, words failing. Thank you, he managed finally. Ethan nodded once, nothing more. Koda stepped back, releasing the rope, favoring his shoulder now more clearly. Ethan noticed. Easy, he said, placing a hand briefly against the dog's neck. Koda leaned into it for half a second, then looked back toward the ravine. The water was still rising. Ethan followed his gaze. The boxcar stood firm, unmoved, unshaken, and beneath it, the hatch, still hidden, still holding. Ethan exhaled slowly. He'd chosen. Not the maps, not the discovery. People. Always people. He looked down at Koda. The dog met his eyes. No question there. No regret. Ethan nodded once. Yeah, he said quietly. Some things mattered more. Even now. The storm didn't last. It never did out here. It came fast, hit hard, then moved on like it had somewhere else to be. By late afternoon, the sky had already begun to clear, leaving the ravine soaked and changed. Mud where there had been dust. Fresh scars cut into the earth where the water had carved its way through. Ethan stood at the ridge, looking down. The boxcar was still there, unmoved, unbroken, like it had survived worse. Behind him, voices carried softly through the wind. The family he'd pulled from the flood sat near his truck, wrapped in blankets pulled from the cab. The children clung close to their mother, quiet now, the shock settling into something calmer. The man, Miller, stood apart, watching Ethan with a different look than before. Not panic, not confusion. Recognition. Ethan felt it. He turned. You got lucky, he said. Miller shook his head slowly. No, he replied. We got you. Ethan didn't answer. Miller stepped closer, glancing once toward the ravine. That wreck, he began, then paused. You knew it would hold. Ethan's jaw shifted slightly. Didn't know, he said. Just didn't have anything else. Miller studied him for a moment longer. Then his gaze dropped to Koda. The dog lay near the edge, front legs stretched out, head resting low, breathing steady but heavier than usual. The bandage around his shoulder had darkened slightly where the rain had soaked through. He stayed on the line. Miller said quietly, even when the current hit. Ethan followed his gaze. Yeah, he said. Miller nodded once, something settling in his expression. Then he looked back toward the ravine again. There's something down there, isn't there? He asked. Not accusing, not demanding, just stating it. Ethan didn't answer right away. The wind moved across the ridge, carrying the scent of wet earth and something deeper, something pulled up from below. He could lie, walk away, let it stay buried. But the moment had already passed. Too many eyes, too many pieces in motion. He looked back down at the boxcar, then at the land stretching beyond it, dry, cracked, waiting. My father thought there was, Ethan said finally. Miller didn't move. Thought? He asked. Ethan exhaled once. Wasn't wrong. Silence followed. Not empty this time. Full. Miller stepped closer to the edge, careful of the softened ground, studying the ravine with new attention. You opened something, he said. Ethan didn't deny it. Miller's eyes shifted again, calculating now. Maps? He asked. Ethan said nothing. That was enough. Miller nodded slowly, almost to himself. Water, he said. The word hung in the air. Simple. Heavy. Ethan glanced at him. You see it too? Miller let out a quiet breath. If those lines are what I think they are, he said, trailing off. He didn't finish. Didn't need to. They both understood. Ethan looked back toward the truck, at the family, at Koda, at the life he'd been drifting through before this. Then back to the ravine. This place isn't what they think, he said. Miller gave a small, almost humorless smile. No, he replied. It never was. Footsteps approached behind them. Briggs. He must have come back after the storm passed. His boots stopped a few paces away. Well, he said, voice tight, seems like quite the day. Ethan didn't turn. Miller did. Briggs glanced between them, then down at the ravine. His expression shifted. Something in the air changed. Even he could feel it. You found something, he said. Not a question. Ethan finally turned, met his eyes, didn't speak. Briggs swallowed once. Whatever confidence he'd had before, it wasn't there now. Look, he said, forcing a steadier tone. We can talk about this. Whatever it is. Ethan shook his head, small, final. Briggs stopped. For the first time since Ethan had met him, he didn't push, didn't argue. He just looked past Ethan, down at the boxcar, like he was seeing it for the first time. Then he stepped back. Slowly. Something in his posture had changed. Less certain, less sure. Ethan watched him go, then turned back to the ravine. The light had shifted again. Late afternoon now. Golden. It caught the rusted steel of the boxcar just right, turning it from something broken into something almost deliberate, purposeful. Koda pushed himself up slowly and walked over, settling beside Ethan. Close, steady. Ethan rested a hand on his neck, fingers pressing lightly into the fur. Easy, he murmured. Koda leaned into it. Just enough. Ethan looked down at the wreck one last time, at the place everyone had written off, mocked, forgotten. He shook his head slightly. He didn't leave me a wreck, he said. Miller glanced at him. Ethan's eyes stayed on the ravine. He left me something worth fighting for. The wind moved through the valley again. But this time, It didn't sound empty. It sounded like something beginning. If you made it this far, you already know this wasn't just about a wreck in the dirt. So let me ask you something simple. If you think Ethan should keep digging and protect what his father left behind, drop a 1 in the comments. If you think he should walk away before others come for it, drop a 0. I read every single one. And if this story stayed with you, go ahead and hit subscribe. There are more stories like this coming. Stories about people who were written off and the things they found when no one was watching. I'll see you in the next one.